welcome back, I think. So I'm going to start raw here as opposed to prepping things, just so I can see how this goes when you kind of experiment. So what I have here is I've got a Morris Grand Prix pocket watch. Here it is here. And it had a broken balance staff. And what I did was make the balance staff in my Watchmakers lathe. And I have the new balance staff right here. I'm going to lift this up here without breaking it, hopefully, and show you what this looks like. This is the new balance staff with new pivots and everything. So that's it there. Let's see if that focuses somehow. Yeah. So that's the new balance staff. And I'm holding it on one of the ends here, not the hairspring end, but the roller table end, I think. So this balance staff is, I just dropped it. That's why I think I said I'm going to make this movie without editing stuff, so you can just see how sometimes when you're doing things with watch repair, it doesn't always go absolutely perfect, but you try to make it perfect so you don't make any big mistakes, but stuff just happens. So this just dropped in here somewhere and I don't know where it is. Oh, there it is. So that's the new balance staff right there. Let me move this around so you can see it. So that's it right there. And it is mucho tino. That's my Spanish. There it is. So I made that with a, I think it was my Boley Lennon lathe. Right, I'm going to put this back in the other container because I don't want to be dropping this thing a lot. The pivots are pretty strong, so if the weight of the balance staff itself dropping is not going to break the pivot. So my challenge, this phase 2 of this balance staff, was to determine how much material that I've got to burnish off this pivot, right? Because I've got the pivots on the end of this new balance staff, and I've got to take these things down to something that fits in the jewel holes. So this video is experimenting using a new tool I just got, and what I'm going to do is take out the balance cock here very carefully. I'm going to use this as my base for measuring and see if this works. So the rest of it for now I'm going to put back. We're watching videos from Bun Special, and every now and then he burps, which I laugh. I think it's hilarious because everybody burps, but I don't know, do you burp on video or do you edit the burping, or what do you do, right? Because you don't want people to think that you're rude and crude and socially unacceptable, but everybody burps. So I think that his burping is hilarious. So what I got here, the big win here for me, was this here. So cylindrical metric jewel gauges from Swartchild, S-W-A-R-T-C-H-I-L-D. So what I had done before to measure the end shake on the balance staff is I put the balance staff in the jewel hole, and the jewel hole would be, see if I can point this out so you can see the jewel hole here. Get tweezers out again, right there. And then I'd check the end shake in the jewel hole for the hairspring side of the balance staff to make sure there was a good fit. And you can measure it with a micrometer, but then you've got the chance of snapping off the pivot on the end of the balance staff. So I'd measure it with a Dormeen's gauge to get it down to close to the right size, sort of 0.2 millimeters, and then I'd actually Dormeez it down to about 1 millimeter, and then I have this ruler I use. Right, let me grab this for a second so you can see it, and it is I think it's vintage as well. So this ruler here, and it's a Burrell, so it's not cheap. This ruler here has got jewel holes, right? And jewel holes go from 0.7. This is 0.07 millimeters up to 0.79 millimeters. So, and I find that typically the balance staves are somewhere around, 0.9 for watches, but for bigger pocket watches, they're usually 0.12, somewhere around here. So what I do is I put this in the lathe. First of all, I want to apologize because my thumbnails are pretty long here. I need to trim those things down. Anyway, so my fingernails are long here, but I play guitar, so I'm allowed doing that. So anyway, so what I do is in the lathe, when I've got the balance staff in the lathe, I use these jewel holes, and when I get to probably 0.24, somewhere in there, I use that and I push this in towards the balance staff like that. And if it doesn't fit, then I go up and higher until it fits. Then I use a stone to burnish, to shave it down more, not burnishing it, but shaving it down more, until I shave it down to about 0.15, 0.16, 0.17. And then I take the balance staff out of the lathe, usually, because I'm worried about using a lathe and breaking it. And I take that balance staff and I put it in the my Jacot tool. And the Jacot tool, or maybe just grab the Jacot tool for the heck of it, just so you can see the whole story here. I got a new Jacot tool recently, so this is the newer one. It's the newer, older one. So this one's probably, it's not, I don't think it's as nice as the one I had before, but this, let me move this out of the way so I don't lose it. This is the Jacot tool, and I'm going to adjust my camera here so you can see this a little bit better. So there's the Jacot tool. So what I do then is, so I take this tool, the Jacot tool, and and I'll assemble a balance completely. So not just a staff, but I'll take the balance staff, I'll stake on the at least put on the roller table on it, and I'll put the balance on the staff. I don't have to put the roller table on it. I don't have to put the hairspring on it. In fact, I shouldn't. And then I'll put that in the end of this tool here, and that'll go basically on this here on the end. And then the balance staff itself goes into this notch here. And then I use this bow back here that you can barely see. There's the bow, there's the hair for it. I use the bow, I put it around here. This is in a vise, and I spin this around, and it spins the balance, and then it spins the pivot is laying in this little trough, and I make sure that the trough is set to the right height. So I just basically, this is 0.15 here, and so if I want to shave it down to 0.12 and it's at 0.17, I'll work my way down to 0.12. I won't go right to 0.12. So in this case here, I have to put in this here, this end of the tool. So I'll do that, right? And then I'll adjust that. This thing here moves in and out for adjustment as well. And I'll adjust that down until I get 0.12 on the end. And then after I've done that, I take this out, I turn this around the other way. And as you can see on this side, these are, I think they're called the lanterns, and they've got a multitude of little holes on the end, right? And these little holes, you can just sort of barely see them. You put the pivot through the hole, and then I'll shave the pivot down after I've fitted it a few times to the right size. So what I was missing here was the actual measurement. So as I said before, the actual jewel hole was great, or the ruler I had for the jewels was great, but it was kind of missing the, let me put this away here, it was missing the, I had to take it out of the lathe to actually measure it. And every time, I used the jewel holes to measure it within the lathe, but when it got to being really small, I was worried about breaking the pivot off the end. I'm trying to attach the ends here. was worried about breaking the pivot off the ends and not being able to just have to start all over again with another device. And while I'm here, I'll show you the other Jacot tool. This is a bigger one. It's a bit bigger, and it's gorgeous, and it works really well. And these are some burnishing files. I have better ones than this, but these are for burnishing, smoothing out the pivot end. It's called burnishing the pivots. So this is a Jacot tool I've typically used. The one you just saw is brand new, but I haven't cleaned it up yet. So this is the one I typically use to actually spin the balance and burnish the pivots. So I'm going to put these away so I can keep talking about this and show you what I'm going to do now. So the problem is I'm really afraid to leave that balance staff on the lathe, right, and spin that lathe around to measure, basically leave the balance staff on the lathe and then use the ruler and then use the burnisher to burnish and then use the ruler again, burnish, ruler, burnish until it gets down to 0.9. Because 0.9 is like just slightly the size of a hair, basically. So I got this, right, this tool set, which is gold, Jerry, it's gold. And each one of these is a pivot gauge, basically, metric jewel gauge, it says. So if I want to measure this, I haven't used this yet, so this is kind of experimentation right now. So if I wanted to use this, I figure what I got to do, and this is figuring, and someone's probably going to correct me because these babies are hard to find. What I have to do is pick out the gauge I have and then fit it into the hole and actually see if the end of this jewel gauge fits in that hole. So the same kind of thing. And then I can get an idea of actually what size the thing has to be, right? And then after I've done that, right, for this, because I'm really guessing, I don't have to take the balance staff off and put it and place it in here and then see if it fits or not. I can take this out and then actually find out what the size of the hole is, and then it's possible for me to burnish the pivot down in the lathe, or take it out of the lathe and use a Jacot tool, but I'll know exactly what size I got to get it down to. And a Jacot tool, I can just make sure it fits in the right trough that I talked about a few seconds ago. So the first thing I do is just grab one of these and then put it in there. But I'm going to see if I can find a base that's a little bit more clear, or use an anvil or something like that. So see if I can use, not sure if this will work any better, but I'm sure what I should probably do, I need to go grab a cleaner piece of Rodico, because this piece looks like it's been through World War IV. So anyway, but I'm going to do it anyway. So I'm going to take the Rodico here and just flatten it out a bit, and then just lay it on here. So I got a little bit of a table here, and then I'll grab the balance cock and then put it in place like this. And there's a cap jewel on here too, but I should be able to get close enough to this whole mechanism to figure out whether it is good enough. So I'm going to move in now a little bit, get a little bit closer here. Isn't that a song? Get a little bit closer now. Anyway, don't sing on camera. So so now I've got these and this. So next thing is to see if I can actually measure this. So I'm going to flip headgear here. I've got these made in China, really close-up things that I have that I use for doing detailed work. And I'm going to grab, say, a 0.14. So I take this out, it's 0.14. So this is what these look like. So if you look at these really close, see if this focuses here. It's hard to focus one of these cameras. I don't know why, but they're difficult to focus. Come on, focus for me. Focus. Give me a close-up. There we go. So if you look at that, it tapers. I'm not going to move my hand because it's going to unfocus, but it tapers down, and then it's one width, and then it actually tapers again, and the very end of that looks like a pivot. So this is a jewel gauge, but that pivot on the very end of this gauge is 0.1, whatever that number was, 0.14. So I will stick that in the hole, and I've never done this before. I just got the tool, and I will see whether that fits in the jewel. So I do this, and I'm looking at it, and it doesn't fit. Now I'm wondering whether I can get a really close-up angle if I put a lens on here and then go in close. So just bear with me, because this is pretty cool stuff. Nerdy but cool, right? It's nerd cool is what it is. So there we go. So that's that. Now if I put this on here and then do this, does it work any better? Maybe not. I don't know. Move this out of the way. Well, you can see it like that, and when I move that out of the way, you can almost see it exactly the same. Anyway, I'll just stay like this. So this is it here. So I get in really close like this, and then I take this jewel hole and I go like that. And I can tell you right now that that does not fit. It's in there, but it doesn't fit. So I picked the next number down, which was, I think I'll go 2 because it seemed like it was not fitting a lot. So that's how you say it. I'll pick the next one down, which is 0.12, right? There it is there. And I wish this thing would focus. It'd be kind of cool if it, you can kind of see it there. So that's 0.12, and if I get nice and close here and see if it fits, go down here again, and man, that's small. And it's still not fitting. So 0.12 is not it. So I'm going to go to 0.10, right? And see if this fits. That's super small. So this actually feels like it fits, because it's going in the hole. So I'm pushing that in the hole. It actually feels like it fits. So that's 0.10. I'm going to go to 0.11, go up one. And when I put these gauges back, I make sure to put the pointy part down, because I think there's material on the bottom of this box that prevents it from going through. So that's this is 0.11. Now when I put that in, I want to make sure it's straight up and down. And that way I can't break the pivot on this either. Okay, 0.11 actually fits, but it feels really snug. And when I put it in, it actually got stuck. So I think the result might be 0.10. Yeah, there's 0.11. Yeah, 0.10. So I'm going to try that again, just to make sure I'm not off. This is really cool, because I will now know, clean the tip of this off in the Rodico, and I will now know that 0.10 is the size I've got to burnish this pivot down to. Yeah, that is absolutely perfect. It's in there with, you can feel it doesn't move around at all. So that fits absolutely perfectly, right? So that's 0.10. So I'll put that back in, and I'll flip this. I flip this around because I think I put it in the wrong way. Yeah. So I'll put that back. So, and I'll put the camera up a bit here so you guys can still see what the heck I'm up to here. So there it is there. So 0.10 was what I used, which is, as you can see, upside down. I gotta flip glasses again here. It's on the top. It's 0.10 right there. These are my guitar picking fingernails again. So 0.10 on the top. So that, in fact, is the right dimension for the pivot that fits into the jewel hole. Now, part 2 of this, we put the balance back in its place, right? And I'm going to grab the movement here. I have the movement right here, so I'm going to just be a bad boy. And where's my movement holder? So I got my movement holder here. So there's the movement itself, right? And just to make triple sure, because we got to check yourself 15 times here, because one mistake and you're kind of screwed. But I'm going to take that 0.12 again. I'm going to get in close a bit, right? And I'm going to take that jewel gauge again, which was 0.10, not 12, 0.10. And I'm going to check that in the hole on the movement itself. So, and I'm hoping that I can get this around without. Yeah, that fits really well. I do have a problem though, because if I look really close to the to this, if I look at the jewel hole in here, I can actually see the balance staff that was from the other balance broken off inside the jewel hole. So I actually can't push the pivot through there, this gauge through there, because the balance staff, the previous balance staff, had the broken pivot, which ended up in the hole. So to cure that problem, it shouldn't be too hard. All I need to do is remove the face here, which is pretty simple. And then I think there's probably a cap on the other side. And I'll remove the face, and then I'll take the cap off, and then I take a piece of Rodico putty, right? And I might, like this Rodico here, and I will shape this sort of in a point, and I'll push it in, and it'll probably push that pivot out of the hole without a problem. So what I don't want to do is, what you might be tempted to do, is use these gauges to actually push the pivot from the end of the balance staff out of that hole. Because if you do that, it's very possible of breaking the tip of the gauge off. And that's the last thing you want to do, is break the tips of these gauges off. These things look like they're kind of made of brass and not steel, but I'm not actually sure. So if I look on the end of these things, no, actually they're steel. So the end of these gauges here, the holding part of the gauge is brass. So the main this shaft here is brass, but then there's the other end point where it does its first taper, and that's steel, and then the second taper is also steel. So there's the pivot on the end. Can you see that? So that little silver part's the pivot, and so it's first taper, then straight shaft, and then pivot. There's a little bit of corrosion on these, but the very end piece of steel is not corroded at all. So there's the pivot for the gauge. So anyway, these things need to be cleaned up just a bit. So that's basically the video on these jewel gauges. And again, what I'll do is, now that I know that this is a 0.10, and I've got to burnish this down to 0.10, I will get out my Jacot tool, and I'm going to bring this out again to show you. Right? Let me move this over here. Move this out of the way so I don't make a mess here. So what I'll do is, I'm going to get the Jacot tool out just so I can complete the video, so I can actually show you how this works, because it would be unfair to stop now, wouldn't it? And I have another video on how to use a Jacot tool that you probably have seen. So now that I know that this is 0.10 millimeters on the end that I've got to shave down on that pivot, I will get the Jacot tool out. So there's the Jacot tool. And I'm going to put my glasses on because I can't see anything without them. So there's a Jacot tool. So on this side here, as you can see, the numbers, there are numbers right on, see pointing here, right there. And then try to, there you go. So you can see 0.11, 0.12 there. So all I do is when I start shaving the pivot down, I pull that out. I make sure that the lineup of this thing here is 0.10, which is here, actually. Tighten the top of the Jacot tool. And then when the, I'll use the old balance staff here so I don't have the new one in here. When this one here is the old balance staff. So this thing here will have the balance on it. And then the staff, straighten that up. There. The staff will rest right on in the groove here. That's 0.10. The trough, that's here. And then I use the burnishing tool, which, and I have another one, but I'll just use this as an example. And this here will go over this back and forth, and I spin this one way while I pull this the other way, and I go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and then until the pivot, the top of that pivot can't be touched by this anymore. And I'll use probably burnish it down, which is with the metal down the sides. That way, when it's the right size, it's smooth as heck as well. So you want it perfectly smooth. And then I'm finished with that. So the first thing I'll have to do is actually put the balance back on this particular balance staff that I made on the lathe. So I'll have to stake the balance back on. That's the balance here. To stake the balance staff. To stake the balance back on, and then put it in here, and then burnish the tips down so that they're the right size. I know they're not the right size yet. They're pretty small, but they're not right yet. So that is how to use the metric jewel gauge from Schwarzschild, and some of the steps that you have to do. So it's precision work, so just take your time doing it. You don't want to have to make another balance staff, because although they're a hoot to make, they take time. So a good balance staff would take you probably, I can probably make one in about 4 hours now, and I've made about 7, 8 of them now. So I'm getting better at it, but it still takes a lot of time. So I recommend taking your time. Get a Jacot tool so you can actually use a Jacot tool to do this with, and always make sure your fingerprints and everything else are off the Jacot tool. I'm not sure whether you have to oil this, because I think this is nickel plated, so oiling it won't make any difference, but just to prevent corrosion, you just clean these things up and make sure the fingerprints are off them. Plus they look really nice when they're cleaned up. And this is the gauge, the pivot gauge they have with this, where you're supposed to slide the pivot along the gauge. But the ruler I have is much better than this. This pivot gauge I don't trust that much. I'm sure it works, but it's just, so 0.10 is down here. So if I slid this down to 0.10, it would stop right here, because that's how pivot gauges work. So, but I like my jewel ruler to measure whether I've gotten success or not. And I just noticed, I think I got a backup lantern here on this thing, which is really cool. Anyway, so thanks a lot. I'll publish this video, and I hope you enjoy it. And I just showed you how I stumble through this when I get a new tool, and I've been waiting for this one for probably about 1.5 years, maybe 2 years, trying to find this tool. Anyway, thanks a lot, and signing out. Bye-bye.